Let's look into these modules in brief, guys, but not in depth. So I don't want you to confuse a lot, talking about the different services and steps. But so let's name them first of all. So the first one that we've got, it's not the first one, so I'll just mix it up. So the first thing we have is identity and access management. Identity, sorry, and access management. So now, so in short, it is called as IAM. So across the organization, providing access to the employees or the users who has access to it. So now, it is one of the important roles in cloud security. So what level of an access that you have, what level of an identity that you're providing, so to an engineer working within your cloud. Okay, let's say now we are handling a lot of different things here, right? So now, let's say now there's a database engineer or a data scientist or who works on a database. Okay, he's just joined. Now everything is there on the cloud. Let's say I'm using AWS cloud, which is very majorly used clouds, guys. So now I have to provide him access to this so that he can work on this storage or maybe configuring a database, anything, right? So now what level of an access that I should provide him? Should I provide him access to networking servers? No, right? So I will only provide him access to what he needs. So we call this as least user access privilege, least privilege. So now what is least privilege is, okay, whatever he needs, I will only give him access to what he does or what he needs for his job. I cannot provide, okay, so now you just join, okay, you take all the access. We will not do that because least privileged access is very important. So whatever he needs access, we will only be doing that. And who's providing all of those access? And we saw there's a lot of services, right? And now we have to define what access for each of these services. We need to create groups. There's a lot many things within there. So identity access management deals with determining what level of an access that a user can have working with these services across the cloud. And one of the very good things that you can learn with cloud security is identity and access management. So the next thing is, so once you create access, so now there might be a lot of infrastructure, right? So we might have deployed a lot of things. You see, this is all our infrastructure deployed on the cloud. So how are we going to protect it? Infrastructure security. Okay, later, so whatever within the infrastructure, we will be having a lot of data as well, right? So we have to protect our data as well. Data protection. And meanwhile, so as we have data protection, so now in order to protect the data, so we have to have security logging and monitoring. Security logging. So I can say security logging and monitoring. Now, in order to ensure that everything is properly working, I have to log what is happening related to security, and I completely monitor them so that I can find what is happening. So if there's any threats, I can able to detect those threats across the cloud, threat detection and response. I can detect the threats and I can able to provide this. So now for threat detection and response, it has AWS and Azure both has automated way of detection and responding to it as well. AWS uses AWS Security Hub. So Azure uses Azure Sentinel, Azure Playbooks using Azure Functions. Now there's a lot of automations. Even in Azure you have Azure Sentinel, and that Sentinel has SOAR, security orchestration and automated response. Now there's different aspects of automation here. Right now we are on the automated era, right? We are using machine learning, artificial intelligence. What are the services that is being used by both of this? And at last, one of the very important is security governance, guys. Governance. If you have some idea about auditing, let's say ISO 27001 or PCI, SOC 2 compliance, or maybe GDPR, HIPAA, NIST, there's a lot of security governance which we will definitely talk about. You should also have some knowledge about it. So we'll also be having security governance and management. So we have each of these modules, guys. And to manage each of these modules, AWS and Azure have its own services. For an example, if you take IAM, right? So if you take IAM and if you're just splitting into what are all the different components that you have in AWS and Azure. So just to define, just to make you understand a bit. So AWS has their own AWS IAM. And to integrate different platforms, they use AWS organization. And to ensure that they could able to make a user login from a single place, they have single sign-on. And they would also have an Amazon Cognito. So it manages user authentication for web and mobile applications that is being deployed on the cloud. Cognito, one of the recent ones and the advanced ones right now. And within Azure, so now Azure has Azure Active Directory. So we call this as AAD, right? So now within Azure Active Directory, they have conditional access. So here this is where AWS, you can say Azure AD conditional access. What this conditional access would do is it enforces the access policies to this to this active directories. So you have B2C, okay, Azure Active Directory, business to client. You have Azure Active Directory identity protection. More importantly, just like they have IAM, so they have role-based access controls. So just like this, within IAM, so both AWS has these services, Azure has these services. If you take infrastructure security, for an example, so for infrastructure security here, so if I just refer down some of the names, we can always refer down for each of this. So we've got AWS, we've got Azure, so within AWS, we've got virtual private cloud, VPCs, right? So they do network isolation. You can do subnetting. You can create access control lists, and you can create security groups using Amazon VPCs. And you have AWS Shield. So this will provide DDoS protection. So you have AWS Web Application Firewall. So we have AWS Firewall Management, and you have AWS EC2 instance where you can deploy your virtual machines. Just like that, just AWS has VPC, so it has VNet. So it also has DDoS protection, Azure DDoS. So it also, sorry, it is syncing down. So it also has Azure Firewall. It also has Azure Web Application Firewall. It also has NSG, so Network Security Groups. Network security groups. Just like that, each of this, maybe for the next session, we'll talk about in general about each of this. So just like as I spoke about for identity and access management, we've got this. For infrastructure, we've got this, and we will be learning whatever the services that would be useful for us. Okay, let's say AWS IAM. So what is IAM? So how do I access, as I provide an access to an employee, I can create a user. I can create some policies for these users. I don't know what access they should have. I could able to define them. So we'll have all of our hands-on practice within AWS IAM, guys. So just like that, we'll have a hands-on practice into all of the security services that is being provided on for AWS and Azure, right? So now as we have our lab environment, so we could always get to have access about it. So for an example, I'll just go to this. So now we haven't still done anything so far, but we are going to definitely do. You see Security Hub is there here. So this does automation of an incident response. You can run different playbooks here, run books here, workbooks here. So just a lot many things. So just like that, we will have platforms and we will learn about it. Okay. So now, as you might have some, at least some awareness on what is really happening on the cloud, right? So what cloud is actually doing. So now cloud is letting us access or letting us integrate our services over a virtualized platform so that it is very easier for us to maintain. So not only easier, no, we all have it in one place. So previously, before it was a very mess, a complete mess. And how can you provide security for a complete mess? Right? You don't know what is leaking somewhere. But if I have everything at once at one platform, so now why can't you just provide security to it, right? So it is also easier to become to manage your assets, and it is also becomes easier to manage security for this assets being deployed on the cloud, right? So now, so just to ensure that we protect everything on the cloud, so we have this cloud security modules. And remember, these cloud platforms uses a shared responsibility model. So now AWS and Azure uses a shared responsibility model. So now I can have a question. Okay, now as I'm integrating everything to the cloud, why can't AWS provide security up to everything? Maybe I can pay them, right? So now why can't they provide security? So as they provide cloud services, why can't they provide services to us, right? So now Azure. So now I integrate everything onto the cloud. So why can't they provide it? So now here, so let's say for an example, I'll just quickly go to AWS share responsibility model just to show you model document. So you have within cloud computing, you have infrastructure as a service. So you have SaaS, DaaS, PaaS, IaaS, IaaS, right? Infrastructure platform as a service. So now let's see. Now it is a share responsibility model. So even I could just say Azure uh, documentation related to shared services. So today, tomorrow we'll talk about this so that we can have more understanding about it. So what is shared responsibility in the cloud? So now, so what do they say? What do they protect security for? If you see this shared responsibility is there within the cloud. So what does they do? So now I have information and data. So within software as a service platform, so the customer has to protect their information. So anything with this, the Microsoft will protect. So here within this cloud platforms, so you can define security in two different ways. So security in the cloud. So now, okay, now you have everything in here, right? So where is our whiteboard? So you have everything in here. So now, so this will protect the cloud platform. So whatever the services that they are using, so that cloud platform will protect their services. But what are we doing? So we are using their services for our data, for our applications. So now AWS says, okay, I will protect my services, but I do not protect the data that you deploy on our services. It's your responsibility. It's your responsibility on how you provide access to your employees or how you provide identity to multiple services. That I don't know. You take care of that security because that is your own infrastructure. The services that you're using, okay, I provide security for that, right? So that is security in the cloud that is being provided by the cloud security provider. So whereas security of the cloud, now they are protecting the security in the cloud, but anything that we are deploying to the cloud, so it's our responsibility to protect that infrastructure that is being deployed to a cloud. It can be applications, it can be storage, it can be databases, it can be networking. So the development, quality testing, if you deploy many other multiple applications, now it's your responsibility to protect that you are deployed to your cloud. So now that is where we've got these modules, and each of these modules are designed in such a way that it can protect all of our assets that is deployed on the cloud. So tomorrow, if we meet, so we'll talk about the shared responsibility model in both AWS and Azure. Meanwhile, so I already created an Azure environment as well. I can also give you an Azure environment access to you tomorrow. But do not worry. So it's not we're not so hurry. So to get into the lab right now, first we will concentrate on learning a bit of basics, definitely from the next session. So we are going to at least do something on the lab with some of the services each of the security modules have. We'll start working on it. So for sure, but before that, so we need to ensure that we know what is happening behind. So now you know cloud, right? So now you might probably get to understand what are you doing on the cloud and how do you protect the cloud, right? So if you have some general awareness like this, it becomes very easier for you to start working on the lab. So meanwhile, we'll also create our own accounts so that we can also have a little bit of interface knowledge about the tool. And meanwhile, all of our practical things, so we will be doing it across the lab, guys. So what are we going to do across the lab? There'll be a lot many things that you will be doing on the lab. So every day we will be having some tasks. So just like okay, now you are working for cloud security. Now I ask you, okay, now we have a requirement to create a rule on a web application firewall or to create a rule on a stateless firewall. So how do you create a rule? So now within infrastructure security, we have firewalls. So how do you create a rule? So that we will understand. Okay, now there's a new person joined. So he need access to an EC2 instance. So now what? How do you create a user? How do you provide access to an EC2 instance? How do you provide access to a specific storage container? So that we'll see in the lab. Right. So each of these we will be having multiple action items to perform, multiple tasks to perform practically. So this course will be a completely hands-on experience. And trust me, after this course, if you are looking for some certifications, you could also probably complete that. Right. So that is all I have for today, and I hope you've liked this. So definitely you would also like it more further, and I can promise you that. So this is going to be a very complete hands-on experience course.